Welcome to Count Me In. I'm your host, Adam Larson, and today we're joined by Justin Smith, the CFO at FinQuery. Justin brings deep insights from the finance and tech sectors. We'll discuss the pay gap between accountants and other professionals, and the future of accounting education and the impact of technology on learning. We'll also explore how FinQuery's investment in employee development boosts satisfaction and retention. Additionally, Justin highlights effective communication, transparency in financial plans, and the importance of celebrating achievements. So tune in as we delve into these critical topics with Justin Smith right here on Count Me In. Well, Justin, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about leadership and growing efficiently. And to start off, I thought we could talk about a little bit about, what's the current state of leadership within organizations, especially now that we're a couple years from the height of the pandemic. What we did before the pandemic isn't going to work after the pandemic.
Yeah, look, I think in many ways the game has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations are functioning in a certainly just geographically more disconnected, manner. There's work remote, there's hybrid, there's a lot of tensions, I think, that exist within organizations. Many companies want what they perceive as more collaboration, and people think about that in terms of being geographically co-located. Workers, I think, are looking back over the last 3 or 4 years and in many ways rightfully saying, hey, there's a lot of great gains that we've had, and we were able to find levels of productivity, and I think workers want to hold on to that. And then there's other tensions that we're seeing out there where prior to the pandemic there was a focus on growth that people still want to see in today's time, but expectations have come down. And a big driver behind that is the fact that the cost of capital prior to the pandemic was a step change different from where it is today. Rates were on the descending rate path. Who knows what the curve of that's ultimately going to look like. But I think most people think, at least in the near term, we're not going back to a zero interest rate, time period. And as a result, the ROI or the threshold at which you're going to invest in demand generation and growth is different. So the punchline is, I think that companies and workers have to be much more intentional about how do they set themselves up and position themselves from a collaboration perspective, from a growth expectation, and how do they effectively meet in the middle so that workers feel respected. They feel like they found a home where they want to invest for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years of their career. And then companies also feel like they've got people that are engaged and bought in and truly want to be there. The way in which I would say things have not changed is that culture remains paramount. If you have a group of individuals that have shared goals, shared philosophies, have a desire to win, I mean, that's the winning formula. That's what everybody ultimately wants to get to. I just believe that in the current time period right now, things are more challenging. And so it's more important and more incumbent for leadership to have a clear, concise set of expectations that are attainable, and that they have a workforce with leaders that are truly committed and engaged.
So, you can read any headlines in the last year or so, and many organizations have had to tighten the belt. They've had to let people go. How do you create that culture and that feeling of, hey, I want you to invest your time in here and stay here as an employee? If, just 6 months ago, they're like, oh, we let go, 10%, 30%, 40% of the staff. And a lot of people are feeling burnt out. They have more work on their hands. How do you balance that? How do you help your teams get there?
Yeah. So there's multiple dimensions to this. I think the first part, if you are any company that is going into a period where a RIF is imminent, or, coming out of a period where they had a large reduction in force, I mean, the first part's empathy, because, our livelihoods, it's more than money, for so many people, it's a reflection of who they are. And I think you also have to realize that for the people, it doesn't just impact the individuals that are no longer with the companies. It impacts the people that stay, because there's a heightened level of paranoia about their job. But we spend, just from a social perspective, we spend more time with the people that we work with than the people that we love and that are, our family members. And when those individuals are no longer part of an organization, at times at no fault of their own, because, the business environment has shifted, it kind of tears its social fabric. So I think empathy is a really important,
Mm-hmm.
aspect to understand. How has this impacted your team, to ensure that, and hopefully this is the case for companies, that when you cut once, you don't go back for 2 or 3 or 4 rounds. We've all seen examples where that's happened, and
Mm-hmm.
no amount of empathy and no amount of relating people is going to give individuals comfort, confidence, if management doesn't have the ability to understand the depth of the cuts that they need to make and be one and done. But I think, going back to your questions, to hit it on the head, clarity is the single most important thing any organization can have. If you want people to have confidence in their role, if you want them to have confidence in the company, confidence in the objective, I think management has to, number one, have clarity around what are the objectives that you're driving to, what are the markers that define success, whether those are financial KPIs or whether those are R&D milestones or go-to-market milestones with establishing partnerships and relationships. You need to understand what is the end goal, but what are the markers along those lines. I think all of us would like to think that our goals are 60, 90 days out, and so we can hit them and achieve and move on, but many of them are multi-year. And so clarity is, what are the markers that we need to hit, along the way, so that you can tell your team, even though we're not at the end point of whatever our immediate objective is, we're on that path. We're doing the things that we need to do. And then more specifically for the individuals within certain departments, your department is doing what it needs to do, or, by the way, perhaps it isn't, but here's the course corrective action so that we can get back on it. I think if leaders are very thoughtful and clear around the most narrow set of objectives and mile markers along the way, and then they can tactically communicate those to the rank and file so that they understand what those shared objectives are, I think that is critically important. Communication and thoughtfulness really carry the day for companies that are navigating transitory timelines.
I like that. I like thoughtfulness. Communication is very important, and being thoughtful too, because everybody's we're all human, whether you're a CFO or whether you're a staff accountant, you're a human who has feelings and emotions, and being thoughtful and being mindful of those person's emotions and feelings as we're navigating all these waters together is huge. And it's almost like you need to have empathy as well for what people are going through. And how do you balance empathy, thoughtfulness, and challenging with, hey, I still got to meet the bottom line? Like, those two don't always go hand in hand.
No, but I mean, this comes back to having an achievable plan.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the examples of companies where, leadership starts out the year and they put forth a budget that is less a financial target that they have. I like to think about a budget as, a set of numbers, both from a revenue and from a cost perspective, that you have 95% plus confidence that you're going to not only meet, but you're going to exceed. There are companies that take a different approach, and they may establish budgets that are aspirational. And if you look back and say, how many times have you hit your budget in the last, 2, 3, 4 years? If the answer to that is never, or if the answer to that is, hey, we get 50% every single year, you've got a management expectation problem. This is not about, it's not about lowering your expectations. It's a matter of understanding what is your TAM, what is your go-to-market opportunity, and where is the company positioned today. I think companies should maximize their opportunity set. They should be bullish. They should be aggressive. They should have plans that everybody should stretch for. But you should also have a level of recognition of, where are we today? What is our go-to-market strategy? What is our product strategy? What investments do we have to make in R&D? What are the implicit risks that we need to understand and anticipate? And, that sense of an achievable plan that, again, requires stretch, it requires effort, but putting forth an achievable plan, whatever that may be, is critically important, so that, again, the team understands there's a multi-year pathway that we're moving toward. And even if growth this year doesn't sound that compelling, that's fine. We're on this multi-year path. Here's these other things that we're doing that may not show up in revenue today, but they're positioning us for growth next year, because we've got this great new product that we're developing, and it's going to be coming out in the second quarter of 2025. And, we believe that in a short period of time, there's going to be some acceleration, making sure that individuals understand and are effectively aligned on those goals. You don't have to share financials. You don't have to, go full kimono with teams. In fact, I think that you shouldn't, because invariably there's going to be volatility along the way. Nobody's going to hit, everything perfectly, but explaining to individuals and making sure that they recognize that the company has a plan. It's multi-pronged. Everybody rows the boat. And as long as you're focused on exactly what you should be doing as part of that plan, then you're achieving success. I think, again, that's just an important piece from my perspective. And by the way, one other item I'll just throw out there, as a CFO, and I was a former banker, I spent nearly a decade at Goldman Sachs. I stay very connected with what's happening in public markets, because private companies, it's opaque. No one ultimately knows, but public companies, they're putting out analyst reports. Companies are giving guidance. I share with our own employee base that expectations that public companies have for themselves, and these are the biggest companies that have the best ability to compete, their own growth expectations have come down materially over the last 2 years. In fact, they've come in nearly 50%. I'm not sharing that data to alarm anybody or concern or lower expectations, but the point is, if you're talking about your forward growth and your forward growth is coming down from what you've messaged to employees historically, being able to go out and say, hey, this cohort of best-in-class companies, they're seeing the same. They're also focused on margin. They're also focused on these exact same priorities. So if we want to think like, act like, walk like, and talk like the biggest and best in the industry, we're actually doing that. And our talk track is in line with theirs, even if it may not feel like that to you in context of where the market was 18, 24, 36 months ago.
So based on all everything you're saying, I love how you're giving your employees a shared sense of purpose as you're making clear the goals that are attainable. Because I think sometimes organizations come out with these very lofty goals that have no stickiness to them, no actual like substance to them. And being able to address it in that way, I think is hugely important for organizations, because you need that shared sense of purpose to make sure everybody's aligned. Because if everybody's not along for the ride, the train can't keep going if all the workers aren't doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. And, I think about our team, and this may be too obtuse, but just at a high level, I think about our team kind of breaking into two cohorts. There are individuals who come to work because they need a job. They're fine with the level they're at. They don't want to escalate. They just quite literally need a job. And those are important people to have in any organization. There are certain roles that without naming specific ones, that, somebody may go into that role and they could be there for 5 or 10 years with the same role and same title. There's the other cohort of team member that they're really career oriented. They're competitive. They want progression. They want to see success. They need to see success in order for them to stay. That is the cohort of employee that you really need to engage with. The best companies out there are mission led. And when I was at Goldman, I had the good fortune. Many of my clients were the successful companies that broke through venture stage and growth stage and private equity, and ultimately tapped the public markets. And there was definitely a success bias of the companies that I had the opportunity to work for. You just see pattern recognition over and over and over in many of these companies, where it doesn't matter what type of, it could be a compliance software, or I took public a company that did back office for trading and hedge funds. And if you sit there on the outside in, if somebody looks at the company, it's not going to get anybody excited. You're not going to go to cocktail parties and talk about compliance software. That's not going to make you popular, I think, in anybody's circles. But when you get under the curtain and you're engaging with the employees and you're preparing them for the testing the waters meetings and the road shows and the post public world where they'll be engaging with the markets, the employees are just on fire. You walk out of those meetings feeling like you grew a foot, because everybody's just excited and pumped about the opportunity. And you also have to kind of like take stock of the fact that why are they so excited about compliance software? Well, they're not. They had a mission, and they felt like they competed against their competitors. They felt like they had a mission to get to a certain customer base, to prove that they were enterprise worthy because they moved from SMB to enterprise. And when they do that, everybody feels like they have a collective win. Those types of things don't happen by chance. There's not a scenario where, people just get 5 customer wins and all of a sudden, boy, they're on fire. Those are objectives that were set by a CEO, most likely in many instances, a founder who had a burning desire to prove, hey, we can be the best. We can be the industry leader. We can launch 2 new products and get them up to scale. Whatever that objective is, it is critically important that among your cohort of employees who are what I characterize as kind of like the athletes of an organization that are truly driving new initiatives, repositioning, transformation, that cohort of employee has to be absolutely engaged with whatever the objectives are. And they need to understand not only what is a team win, but to borrow like a baseball analogy, they need to understand that their own batting average expectations so that, when they're connecting with the ball, they need to know how are they performing against whatever their expectations are. So that clarity around company objectives, team objectives, and even if there aren't these big visible wins as an organization, our long-term objective is X, and you need to do Y and Z along the way. I think that's just a critical component to getting people excited, engaged, and feel mission-led.
Yeah, mission-led is hugely important. And when you switch from like goals and stuff like that and switch to a mission as opposed to like the tagline or whatever, it really kind of changes your mindset of how you look at what your organization is doing, as opposed to just, well, I just got to do my task today and get home. Like, no, I want to be part of this bigger thing that's pushing this boat forward, and you have a better sense of purpose.
Yeah. And by the way, you also have to celebrate publicly, within your organization when somebody does something. I mean, we had, this is going back, but this was a big celebration. So when I joined FinQuery, we had a day sales outstanding. So our accounts receivable, it basically took us a little over 2 months on average for us to collect. Over the course of a year, we moved that from a little over 2 months to 1 month. And there were a number of things. So we did some software, we had some new approaches with our customers and engagement, but that freed up for our organization. So putting aside any new sales, I mean, that was quite literally millions of dollars of cash got freed up. And we're profitable. So, we don't have a debt dynamic, but if you're a company that is growth stage and you're using a revolver or you have to go borrow capital, if you had that type of move, let's say, and I'll just pick a number, let's say you freed up $5 million.
Yeah.
Well, interest rates right now are nearly 10% for revolver debt. So freeing up $5 million means not only do you have that cash, but you cut your interest expense by $500,000. If you're going to go have to raise money by freeing up $5 million, IRR expectations in venture and private equity, they're approaching 20%. So you freed up dilution in your company. Being able to frame it to individuals in a way that they're probably not thinking about it. They're just saying, hey, look, day sales outstanding goes from 60 to 30, and it's just a number on a performance metric KPI. I dimensionalized it in front of our entire company to say, hey, by the way, our accounting team brought in X% of the overall cash earned this year. Accounting never gets revenue recognition.
Yeah,
but
huge.
We talked about it in that sense, and I'll tell you, my accounting team is well deserved. They're very smart, talented, hardworking, and I mean, I think they felt like they were walking 6 inches taller for a month or so. And by the way, well deserved.
Yeah,
they absolutely should have felt that.
So we always measure success in an organization by financial terms, and a lot of times, if the employees are doing well, a lot of times that reflects in the revenue and the bottom line of what's happening. But should we, as organizations, be measuring kind of things like non-financial, like employee satisfaction, overall well-being? And should that be part of our like measure of success? Like, hey, yeah, these numbers are looking good, but also our employees feel good about it. Like, is that something that organizations should be doing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that I don't think that anybody should be looking at spot absolute analytics, whether it's a Glassdoor rating to say, hey,
Yeah.
we need to be 4.2 and not 4, but I think you should pay attention to trends.
Yeah.
The to borrow a cliche, the rising tide raises all ships. And by the way, the opposite of that is true. If you look at employee satisfaction, it was pretty high in 2021 once people, saw, and by the way, this is sector specific. I don't want to be ignorant to the fact that there were many industries actually that were feeling a lot of pain. But within the tech sector where I live, work, and operate, that was a fairly robust time period because everybody was spending massively because a ton of stimulus money, and then technology was enabling people to work remotely. And so it was a boom time. So employee satisfaction was sky high because people were getting raises every single month. If you left one job, you'd get another one. Or by the way, in some instances, people would have two at the same time. And so the opportunity set was high. And so Glassdoor ratings were pretty high. But, post, what was it? I think the slide and SaaS started in November of 2022.
Yeah.
So from that period on, all those ratings started coming down. I think organizations need to understand where's the tide going and what is your trend relative to that baseline. For us, we pride ourselves in a handful of metrics. So we look at things like voluntary turnover. And we're very proud of the fact that our voluntary turnover we get data from 2 third parties on things like salaries and turnover and benefits. And of both benchmarks that we get, we're well below the average. And a very important one for us is engineering and tech talent turnover, because historically, there are a lot of jobs. Those are easy to move remote. And our turnover is about half of what, many of the benchmarks are. So there's many things that we could potentially attribute that to. But we think, and I think people ultimately vote with where they spend their time and where they spend their dollars. And, we are very fortunate the fact that we've got an engaged workforce. So I pay attention to, again, voluntary turnover, pay attention to tenure. And then we do a full 360. So not only do I rate my team members every single year, and it's, by the way, not every single year, it's every 6 months. And it's not for the purposes of being critical. It's for the purposes of making sure that people understand, where are they going? How are they trending?
Yeah.
Sometimes people go through, tough moments in life, or sometimes people get promoted and they're not connecting with that higher level job. Management's not easy. It's not for everybody. And so we want to make sure that there's consistent feedback. And by the way, I get that feedback too. So if I'm not communicating something, if I'm not, responding or engaging with people, I'm going to get a visible scorecard. And so that's something that the SLT or senior leadership team, at our company, we actually look at our own scorecards and how are our departments showing in terms of feedback? What's the engagement of sales? What's the engagement of accounting and finance and marketing? And if there are gaps and there's, some disconnect, those are tough conversations we have with each other, and not just with our teams. So being open and receptive to that type of feedback is important. And also recognizing a bad scorecard is likely more important than a good scorecard, because it's a leading indicator of some challenge.
Yeah. Well, I've always been curious about a 360, and I've always been like, hey, I want to work in an organization that has a 360 so I can see it in play. Because a lot of times with the normal feedback is, you have your supervisor giving you that information, and then you might have a chance to give a comment back to them, but it's not a true 360. And you're not always able to give feedback to your cohort. So I'm glad it's been successful. And do you feel it's been a successful thing at your organization?
Yeah. So we had a just really terrific, dynamic, chief people officer. So she predated me joining FinQuery. She put these actions in place. I'm very grateful. When I was at Goldman, we did the same thing. We did 360s. So I have worked throughout the majority of my career at organizations who do these. The other part of this, though, is that there's an accountability. So going back to my comment around engagement, if you give somebody a review in a 360, so whether it's me giving a review to somebody who reports to me, or somebody giving me feedback, who's one of my direct reports, if there's something new on that 360, in some senses, that's a failure. And what I mean by that is, if if there was an issue in my organization that was called out by, team members, whether it's a direct report or, 2 or 3, levels down, and I'm finding out about that on a 360, I consider that a failure on my side. And again, if it's 2 or 3 levels down, I consider that a failure of the people who are managing that individual, because we should be engaging with people to where they feel like if there is a challenge, an issue, or a situation, it should be percolated immediately. So when I do my reviews with my team, my goal is for them to come out of them not only with a clear sense of where do they stand and what are things that they can work on, but I also want them to say something to the effect of, yeah, this makes complete sense. We talked about X and Y and Z over the last several months. I'm making progress on it. I appreciate the fact that you called that out, and this is what my path is. I don't want the 360 to be the point in time where I hold anything new back, because that's a challenge. That's where I think people feel like they'll say something to the effect of, well, why didn't you tell me? Or they'll feel like potentially people are out to get them, right? Because they'll say, well, everything feels fine when you've been working, and yet you're putting this on my review. That's a surprise. A 360, in my view, when I know that they're coming up, and we do them in the fall and the spring, I always make sure it's just a good marker for me to ensure that I'm engaging with the team. And I do one-on-ones with my entire team. That's the full accounting, finance, data analytics. And then I also run some of our services implementation and have engagement on revenue as well. So it's a broader remit. I ensure that I'm connecting with every single person on my team, on a quarterly basis at a minimum, most of them on a monthly to bi-weekly, so that there are no surprises.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what you said before about having that clear communication, and that includes things like coaching and helping people improve on things. And the approach of, if it's a surprise, there's a problem. I think that's a great way to do it. And as we shift the conversation a little bit to we know you can read articles in accounting in different accounting publications and see that keeping talent is hard, getting new talent is hard. How has that impacted your team trying to keep your talent there? And also, younger people aren't going to school for accounting very much anymore. And how do you get new accountants in? How have you been navigating those waters?
Yeah. So look, I think pay is going to be a big part of this. Like the job market, especially for accountants, like it's supply and demand driven.
Yeah.
I have long felt that accountants in general are underpaid. And what I mean by that is, if you compare what a accountant at a Big Four is going to earn, 2 to 4 years out of undergrad, and you compare that to somebody who goes to Wall Street on the finance side, there's quite literally probably X difference between the finance and the accounting side. So it's not even close. And then you also compare that to what people could earn in technology, especially if you're AI oriented. There's got to be a catch up. And over time, when individuals are smart and talented and they're figuring out where they want to spend time in their career, they're going to look at and say, what is the opportunity set? What's the job look like? And what does the comp look like? So I think a big part, the accounting, especially in Big Four, my expectation is that fees for companies are likely going to rise in the future, because the fees that they're going to need to pay their employees are likely going to rise, or we're going to have to accept the fact that we're going to have a slimmed down, diluted accountants. Like we're going to have, something's going to have to give. This type of dynamic, like today, it still probably works, but if you play this out and you assume that the trajectory of the trends stay, in place for the next 10 years, like something's going to break. And ultimately, accountants are conservative. The overseers are conservative. There's discussion around, reducing the requirements from an accounting perspective, so the number of hours that you have to have. I believe that with education, in innovation or technology combined with education, we should be able to do things more efficiently. I mean, the U.S. and I'm probably going off on a bit of a diatribe, but like why is dental school 4 years, chiropractors 4 years, medical schools 4 years? Medical schools been 4 years for 100 years, and we've gotten infinitely better in education, and yet we can't figure out how to truncate that. Whereas you look at international, the actual core didactic portion of medical school is 2 years, and yet we're still at 4. Boy, that doesn't make sense.
Nope.
So there's I think in U.S. education overall, we need to recognize that technology and just availability of information has allowed us to potentially train people more efficiently. And I think that that's going to play out, should play out on the accounting side, combined with, I just think, increased remuneration.
Yeah. How important is things like training and development for your team to make sure that they're staying on top of things? And do you allow them extra time saying, hey, I want to make sure you have time to do this?
Yeah. So we do this a couple different ways at FinQuery. One, the founders of FinQuery, and this has been something we've done for years, predating me. I'd love to take credit for it, but it was admittedly in place before I joined. We have a very generous learning and development budget. So we actually give a couple $1,000s to employees to spend however they deem relevant to their job or to their growth. So if an accountant wants to learn and go take an AI course, we'll cover, a few $1,000s. And by the way, we'll also give them the time to go and do that.
Yeah.
So, having the opportunity and the time to be able to upskill is an important component. That's an area, frankly, a lot of people in our organization are spending time is understanding AI. Not that we're all going to go out and we're going to become, AI engineers, but I think we can all agree it's going to impact what we do in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So giving people, the opportunity to invest in that, but some people use it for public speaking courses. Some people use it for, different types of classes, because actually we had some individuals in our company that wanted to move to product, and they weren't in product. They were actually in accounting. And so they went to a few conferences and learned about product and refined their skill set and ultimately made the move over there. So it's easy to say that you support employees to learn and develop their skills and capabilities, but it's another to put actual dollars behind it. Again, not just giving them a stipend, but also allowing them to take time to do that. And I would surmise that many of the individuals at FinQuery, part of the reason that they stay is that they know that they can grow not only linearly in their job, but they can also grow tangentially through the opportunities that we provide them and that flexibility.
Well, and that's hugely important to staying connected to the goals, staying connected to the company culture, feeling like that you're heard, your needs are wanted, and that you want them to feel like that, hey, we want you to succeed, we want you to upskill, we want you to become better at what you're doing, which goes back to everything we've been saying so far.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've got people are smart and treat them as such.
Yeah.
Pattern recognition is one of the things that human beings do really well. And if you're saying something that's inconsistent with the way in which you're acting, you could get grace on that for a short period of time, but over time it's going to erode confidence, it's going to erode engagement, and you ultimately get what you get.
Yeah. Well, Justin, this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you sharing all the things you've learned and your journey so far, and I hope that everyone got something out of it today. And just thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it, Adam. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.